So, a little under 2 years ago as of me writing this, I did a video about a little analog horror series called The Painter, created by artist UrbanSPOOK, who is known more commonly on the wider internet as UrbanSPOOK. The series is also referred to as UrbanSPOOK sometimes, so I might be using them interchangeably. Since that video came out though, a lot has happened for me. I was only a year into college during that point, and now I'm hopefully almost done. And this channel, which now has over 50,000 subscribers, holy crap by the way, thank you guys, had barely just passed the 2K mark the week of that original upload. That video of mine was the first that really made me think this whole YouTube thing could actually go somewhere, as it was the first of mine to go any semblance of viral, at least compared to some of the other stuff I was putting out at the time. So, in truth, I do owe UrbanSPOOK a bit of a thank you in that regard, as that was what really got me going. Since then though, The Painter has reached its conclusion, and according to some whispers I've heard on the internet, it actually ended up having some substance to offer and improved on areas where the previous episodes had been criticized. So I think, given how that original video helped me out so much, I wanted to check out the ending and give it my thoughts with as open of a mind as I can possibly give it. Now I will try my best, but to set some things straight, no, I'm not just ignoring everything that has happened before. While I do think I was perhaps a bit harsh on it originally with the benefit of hindsight, in particular my original criticism that some of the art in the series sucked, I wish I would have rephrased that. It doesn't suck. The point I was originally trying to make in that first video was that some of the photos that were put in there just seemed like repurposed paintings rather than being made with the intent of looking like photos. I don't know if that makes sense. At least to me they looked out of place. I do wish I would have phrased that a little better originally. I also think I was just in general plain mean. Which, not that I think it was unwarranted, but I probably would have chilled out a little if I had made that nowadays. Anyways, to set things straight, I do still maintain that the original 8 episodes of The Painter are not particularly well-intentioned, edgelord gore slop material. There is almost nothing of substance to be had there, not very scary, and uses shock value to poke reactions out of people rather than to actually service the story. And in case it wasn't obvious from the store and the titling of the videos all having analog horror in them, it seemed little more than an attempt to capitalize off of the analog horror trend of the time. If you want to hear more in depth about it, I would check out that original video, but honestly I don't really like it that much anymore, save for the dead meat bit that I did in the latter half of it. I know this is a bit different from my more anime slash show based content that we've been on lately, and if you are here for that kind of stuff, we'll be back to it soon enough. But I've had an on and off investment in this, so I think I need to see it through. So without further ado, let's get right into the actual video. For those who are unfamiliar with The Painter and don't want to sit through that other video or the actual series, here's a brief summary. The Painter is an analog horror series, which at one point in time the creator really wanted you to know that, which follows the crimes of a pair of serial killers through a series of police tapes. The gimmick though was that the police would find out about the murders through paintings left by the killers, which often contained details about how the victim died. The formula was as follows. Police stumble upon some gruesome murder scene or scenes during an unspecified time period, early enough to have the series be documented on VHS tapes, but late enough to where there's fucking Ring doorbells. They then find some paintings, usually describing the murders from that episode or the next episode, and then there's some evidence of what the killers look like. Rinse and repeat this 8 times and you have yourself an analog horror series. Over the course of the series though, and amidst increasing backlash from the internet, in particular over the use of topics like SA and CSA, the ways that people were murdered in this series seemed less like they were actually relevant plot points and more like an outlet for the creator to vent his frustrations with so many people reacting negatively to his work. As what started out with a poor taste killing and assault of some children quickly spiraled into topics like bestiality and necrophilia. That's getting sidetracked a bit, but it is important context. Anyways, as the investigation goes along though, more and more clues are revealed about the killers. Little slips in their secrecies, such as the aforementioned fact that they were a pair, as well as videos and pictures of their faces being left behind at the crime scenes. Where we last left off, we got some Ring doorbell footage after a series of murders that happened to involve the violation of the corpses of both some dude and a cat. And that was really it. It was unclear whether or not UrbanSPOOK would upload again, given the huge gap between uploads as well as the additional controversy that occurred during that time period. But a bit over a year ago, they came back with an episode titled Hell, and another year later, one titled The Painter. So I'm gonna go ahead and catch up on the series real quick, and then we'll come back to it. So that was something. To summarize, after the Ring doorbell shenanigans in the 8th episode, the police get tipped off about some weird shit going on inside of an abandoned paint factory. Inside, they pretty much find the usual, including, but not limited to, a metric ass ton of bodies, the missing bits of those siblings that were assaulted, so hey, I was wrong, they did come up again, just still doesn't really serve any purpose beyond, oh me, oh my, look at how fucked up this is, but I'm getting ahead of myself. A literal bucket of dicks, a human centipede, 69, and of course, more paintings. If you'll notice from the footage on screen, there's actual animation, which is cool. A large part of mine and many others' complaints about the series up to when I had last covered it was that it was more or less just a slideshow that had the VHS tape effect lazily thrown onto it, rather than actually trying to imitate it being, you know, a recovered VHS tape, like the whole premise of the series is. Anyways, the little bit of animation does accomplish just that. It's a lot more convincing to watch rather than a slideshow pretending to be a VHS tape. Furthermore, a little bit of animation is a good way to put a lot of production quality into your work while still telling virtually the same story. So I do have to give some credit where it's due. Now, having said that, and in hindsight, I wish I had screenshot it when it happened, as I believe Urban Slug has either taken down all of their tweets or those tweets got banned somehow, I don't know. So you're just gonna have to take my word for this. Feel free to not, I understand not wanting to just blindly believe somebody who has no fucking picture. But when this episode did come out, Urban Slug had put up a tweet right afterwards where they had pretty much just said something along the lines of, oh well, it's crazy how if you just throw some animation onto a series, people will suddenly think it's better. Like, yeah, they phrased it like people were dumb for being excited about the animation and improvement in quality, but I would hope the people consuming your content actually appreciated the effort and time you were putting into improving the visuals. The series is evidently controversial, but I would hope that you would still want to improve with each continuous iteration of your series. We'll come back to that though. At the end of the search in the building though, they come across the phrase, quote, once you've been to hell, you never come back, prompting them to do a wellness check on a previous victim who had said that exact phrase in an interview. Scary face shenanigans happen, and upon arriving, the cop who was sent to do the check stumbles upon the attempted murder of said previous victim. He slimes out one of the killers, who was a cop that was previously presumed dead all the way back in like the 2nd episode, and he like appears to be some kind of undead thing. His face is skinned and he's missing an arm, which is presumably the one from the wax pile back in like episode 3 or 4. I don't remember which exact episode. Editor me, please fact check this. I don't want to do it. Oh, he's also naked just for funsies. The remaining murderer though is arrested, one Mona Lanius, who confesses to over 100 murders. Ooh, scary. A painter killer basically named Mona Lisa. I get it. That's really cool. So now that the remaining painter has been arrested, we are subjected to an all-inclusive, no details barred interview with the heinous Mona Lanius. But not until after we've had our regularly scheduled, look, people died, this is how they died, isn't it scary? Anyways, in the interview, Mona lays it all out on the table. No more secrets, everything finally gets revealed at long last. Years of subtle foreshadowing and honing the art of storytelling has all led up to this. And so, what do we get to learn? Well, Mona and that cop guy that was the other killer had been friends in the same orphanage growing up and got into all sorts of wacky trouble, you know, like the usual kind that one might get up to during their youth, such as sewing animals together, weird adoptive sibling incest shit that was weird even when Attack on Titan did it, getting fucked by a dog, making a dog fuck another dude, you know, the whole shebang.
One time, me and Bill had the orphanage dog fuck me, you know, just...
Bro. The two grew apart but came back together to become the painters because of sounds. Yeah, so when they were kids, they discovered these statues that like manifest an evil red dude inside of you, who is supposed to be like the actual painter, I guess. And the actual like supernatural painter dude was the one calling all of the shots, but like both of the killers were still evil anyways, so what does it fucking matter? Hey, editor me here. It is currently early as fuck in the morning, and I really would like to have this over with. But I realized I explained this poorly here. So here's a brief explanation of why this whole red man reveal doesn't work for me. So the twist with the red man and the evil painter is supposed to be like this big gotcha moment, this big like, holy crap, everything makes sense now. And the angle that UrbanSPOOK goes for seems to almost be one where our killers are supposed to have been implied to be framed, if that makes sense. Like Mona Lanius here says they keep turning off the machine that makes you want to kill people. She's like, oh, well, they turned it off, but whenever I'm alone, they turn it back on. So it's almost supposed to seem like these people are like innocent, or at the very least being made to do this sort of thing, but then they're just fucking evil anyways. So literally, what does it matter? The presence or lack thereof of the red man changes nothing to the actual story. It's just a reveal for the sake of having a reveal. All right, anyways, back to the video. Also, Mona tried sneaking a grenade into the court through her cooch.
It
So yeah, that's the level of subtlety we're at this point in time. Anyways, Mona goes back to jail after the interview and gets stabbed and killed off screen. The main antagonist of the series, and the only one with actual dialogue, gets killed in a singular line of exposition. Bravo, Vince. What follows is an epidemic of murders across the country, as both paintings and bodies turn up in a, no joke, 4-minute long slideshow of paintings that is accompanied by a wall of noise in the soundtrack. Sands. Before we see a glimpse of the Red Painter one final time before the series closes. In a series full of, look, this bad thing happened. Look, here's what that bad thing looked like. Look, here's more details. Isn't it so scary? I could not possibly think of a more fitting ending than literally just shoving as much shit as the viewer as possible for the last third of the finale. No, it's cool because like, look, there's so much murder happening. Because of the implication, themes and such, yeah, fuck you. I don't think I'm crazy to say that this finale is underwhelming or anticlimactic even by UrbanSPOOK standards. While I am very openly not a fan of the previous episodes or Urban Slug's style of storytelling, they at least felt like they were trying to build up to something or convey some possible kind of storytelling, even if it wasn't anything very deep, and even if the storytelling wasn't the primary motive for making the series. Even at the Painter's very worst, when it seemed purely reactionary and created out of spite, there was still a semblance of something being attempted to be told. But now that we're at the end, it only confirms my personal suspicions that there really just was no point to any of it all. You see, there were previously concerns that The Painter as a series was made purely to sell t-shirts with Urban Slug's designs and capitalize off of the general popularity of the analog horror trend that was going on when the series had started. And like, yeah, while they aren't for sale anymore, a good chunk of, if not the majority of the paintings featured in The Painter were all for sale as t-shirts on Urban Slug's website at one point or another. And while wanting to profit off of your creative work isn't an inherently bad thing, it becomes another when you throw said work in a lazy analog horror, give it a fucked up backstory, and then try to turn around and sell it on your website with that context in mind. Now, keeping that in mind, just throwing a barrage of paintings at the end of the finale feels like alt spamming because you didn't know what to do with the work otherwise. They didn't use these paintings on their website, so I guess that's a step up. At least to me, it kind of feels like he just had these paintings backlogged and then threw them all at the end of the series since he didn't know what to do with them otherwise if he wasn't going to sell them. Whether that's a bad thing or not is for you to decide. But to me, it just kind of feels like a lazy way of going about things, especially when the guy clearly does have talent. It takes a lot of work to put shit like this together, but given this guy's general behavior online, I wouldn't be surprised if at least a little bit of his decision making for this series was still done out of spite at this point. Now, I can understand feeling hateful towards the internet in general after all the backlash that their series and general online presence had got, and as such, I can recognize why one wouldn't really care to finish the series with as much sincerity as it had initially started with, if you even want to call it sincerity. But I don't know, man, it just feels disappointing. As someone who, to put it quite plainly, absolutely hated the series and just about everything it stood for, I was still invested by the point of Hell's release since it seemed almost as if there was an effort being made to improve things. While there still very clearly was a way to go with regards to storytelling, as it, quite frankly, didn't really have a story of substance there yet in my opinion, the animation seemed to demonstrate an interest in actually making the series fresh and interesting. Like it almost gave off the impression that the dude might have actually taken the criticism to heart and worked to improve their craft. And then the finale came out. And while there very clearly is effort still put into it, as the paintings don't just make themselves and there is voice acting, we go back to the slideshow presentation alt spamming bullshit that the series had previously been criticized for in the first place. It just feels like instead of rising to the occasion like UrbanSPOOK had initially appeared to be doing, they just backed down and resorted to what they knew how to do best, which is, unfortunately, in my opinion, making subpar edgy content for the sake of making subpar edgy content. Mind you, there was a whole year and some change gap for an episode that was mostly just still images, when the previous episode, with just barely a longer gap, was able to accomplish so much more visually. The added inclusion of the stuff with the dogs or the grenade up the lady's cooch really just feels like the cherry on top for me personally, even when compared to the barrage of paintings that occurs for the last third of the episode. We have this last bit of vulgarity, which, you know, in a series about serial killers probably wouldn't get a reaction if it was made by literally anybody else. But in this specific context, and keeping in mind just how much flack the taboo content in the series had gotten prior, it kind of just feels like UrbanSPOOK turning directly to the audience and saying, yeah, what are you you gonna do about it? And given that they've already thrown the fucking thing onto a t-shirt like they do with everything else, I don't think I'm particularly jumping to conclusions too hard or stepping out of line. As a whole, it's just all really unfortunate. The premise of a story being told alongside the visuals of the actual paintings from the in-lore serial killers of the series itself is such a cool one. But ironically enough, in execution, it feels like the absolute bare minimum is being put into the presentation itself. And while that would normally be okay, as there are other analog horror series or just series in general with lacking visuals but great stories, the storytelling present in The Painter is lacking as well. So you end up with a series that doesn't really excel in any aspect. And that's largely because it's not trying to. So when you finally get a very clear step up in effort being put in the second to last episode, almost gives you the illusion that they care. But then the ball is dropped so hard in the ending that it can disappoint somebody who expected absolutely nothing at all out of the series. And to top it all off, the dude who's making the series has just about some of the thinnest skin of anybody I've seen on the internet. Ordinarily, I wouldn't mention it as it just kinda wouldn't matter, but the reactionary nature of UrbanSPOOK as a creator ends up dictating a lot of the content of the series itself, aside from it also just resulting in some rather hateful content being spread towards people who simply just expressed a hope for something better. Side note, but it does fit in. I wouldn't be surprised if UrbanSlug legit just spends all of his time on the internet looking up his name, as on that original video, he was one of the first people that commented when it had less than 1,000 views. I'll have to dig for the screenshot because he ended up deleting it, but he just generally seems to be very image focused, which is unfortunate given how provocative in nature his work is. This is all without mentioning, by the way, that the series just kinda almost feels like fetish work. Now, I'm not saying that it is, but with how frequent and meaningless the sexual content is in The Painter, as well as the fact that the dude drew Mona Lanius spreading her lips after the series had gotten a bunch of attention from that one video Wendigoon made about it, it can result in that icky feeling that one era of Nickelodeon gave off. You know, that one where everything was produced by Dan Schneider and was a sitcom with 5 billion foot close-ups. And I don't think that's intentional, as it's the kind of icky feeling that makes you worried for the health of the person making it, rather than feeling the actual fear response that I think was intended. And furthermore, this is all without mentioning just how devout UrbanSlug's fans are. We'll go into the critical aspect of it in a moment, but before their tweets got deleted, if you looked at any tweet with Mona Lanius in it, or hell, if you go to their Instagram and you look for any post where they drew her, you'll see people like actually gooning over her. It's so fucking weird, dude. I'm not one to judge people's goons, but like, bro, I'm sure some of it's rage bait, but a lot of it feels genuine. Now, on the critical aspect, I remember when I had initially made that first video, defenders of UrbanSPOOK would say something along the lines of, oh, well, you're just mad that the series is doing something different rather than the same generic formats that every analog horror series does. And while I understand the general sentiment, as a lot of the work that was being put out around the time of The Painter's original release was just Mandela catalog knockoffs, the sentiment itself was just wrong then and is even more wrong now. While the genre as a whole has experienced a decline over the last couple of years, mainly as a result of oversaturation, as well as the staples of the genre either ending or completely shifting genres altogether. With the benefit of hindsight, there are plenty of series that accomplished more with their runtime, whether it be long or short, with about the same amount or more violence or sensitive content. I can completely understand the sentiment that the series may not have been received well because it didn't conform to the norms of the genre, and to some extent I could even start to agree with you, but the series didn't get flack because it was different. Far from it. Boldness in a creative genre that's otherwise stagnant, and combined with a little luck, will get you very far if you're passionate enough. But when the potentially unique format of The Painter wasn't fulfilled, and instead the creator resorted to shock value for reactions, that's not being unique and setting yourself apart, that's being lazy and exploitive. And it's really unfortunate that that's all the series amounted to, for at least myself personally. It's not a phenomenon that's unique to just The Painter, by the way. There are plenty of other works in the genre that get or have gotten similar amounts of backlash for similar points of laziness. But unlike these other works, The Painter stands apart purely because of the sheer amount of wasted potential here. The guy put together all the paintings, all the music, and the story, while lacking for me personally, could have amounted to something if there was more work and care put into it. But from like episode 6 onwards, in my opinion, the series went from something that had potential, even if it was a bit lazy and relied too hard on shock value, to something where any effort that was put in was purely to spite the viewer in response to the hate that it got. And rather than using the momentum it had built up to end on a bang, we get one last slop barrage of paintings after a lady talked about sticking a grenade up her cooch before dying. What an ending. I truly did want to go into this giving the series the benefit of the doubt, and the improvements that were made in the 9th episode got so close to making me feel like there was a point to anything here beyond the simple capitalizing off of the analog horror genre. But as it stands, I can't help but feel that it was all a waste of potential, man. So yeah, those are my honest thoughts on Urban Spook and its finale. Sorry for a negative video, I don't particularly get joy out of tearing into a series, but I did feel like I owed it to myself to see the series through. Plus, if the last video was anything to go by, you guys seem to like this sort of thing. Speaking of, depending on how I'm feeling, the comments may or may not be off on the first video by now. It's nothing personal, I'm chill. But to this day, I still get comments from people fucking arguing with each other about the series, and I just don't think I should sanction that, as funny as it may be to me personally. So anyways, the next video will probably be something long format. I was thinking of doing something about Chainsaw Man again now that it's ended. Maybe a history of for it, I don't know, I guess we'll see. But I'll try to get that done as soon as I figured out what it'll be. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you guys again for 50,000 subscribers, holy crap. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.